Well, this is a legend of a real man. For a long time, people didn't know if he was real, but his name is John Henry. And there's lots and lots of stories of John Henry. John Henry helped to build the railroads when they were building the railroads all across the United States. This is one of many books about him. When they went into a tunnel to go through the mountain, what they would do is they would have a drill, and John Henry would hit that drill, and then the shaker would twist it so it dug into the rock. He'd hit it again, they'd twist it again, hit it, twist it, hit it, twist it, till they had a big enough place out of there where they could put a stick of dynamite, and then they would blow up a little more of the rock and start all over again. Well, the legend says that on that work, one day, the owner of the company brought a steam drill around. These were real machines that they invented to do the work, and they said it could do the work of 10 men. Well, if it could do the work of 10 men, then 9 of those men would be out of a job. So the legend says that John Henry raced that steam drill to see who could go further through the mountain in the same amount of time. And the song, the Ballad of John Henry, tells the legend. Okay? So here's how it goes. When John Henry was a little bitty boy, sitting on his papa's knee, said the Big Ben tunnel on the sea, Lord, Lord, gonna be the death of me, Lord, Lord, gonna be the death of me. Well, the captain, he said to John Henry, you know, bring me a steam drill around. I'm gonna bring that steam drill out on the job. Walk that old steam on down, Lord, Lord, walk that old steam on down. Well, John Henry said to the captain, he said, a man ain't nothing but a man. But before I let your old steam drill beat me down, you know I'll die with a hammer in my hand, Lord, Lord, I'll die with a hammer in my hand. Well, John Henry hammered on the mountain, and his hammer was striking fire, but he broke so hard, he broke his poor heart. He laid down his hammer and he died, Lord, Lord, he laid down his hammer and he died. He said he laid down his hammer and he died, Lord, Lord, laid down his hammer and he died. Well, the man who invented the steam drill, they thought he was mighty fine, but John Henry, he drove 15 feet. That old steam drill, it only pulled 9, Lord, steam drill, it only pulled 9. Well, now they took John Henry to the White House, and they buried him in the sand. And every road comes rolling by, says there lies a steam driving man, Lord, Lord, there lies a steam driving man. Says there lies a steam driving man, Lord, Lord, there lies a steam driving man.
Come, you ladies and you gentlemen, listen to my song. Sing it to you right, though you may think it wrong. May make you mad, but it mean no harm. It's just about the renters on Penny's farm, and it's hard times in the country down on Penny's farm. You move out on Penny's farm, plant a little crop of back around a little crop of corn. Come around and see, gonna split and plot until you get yourself a mortgage on everything you got. It's hard times in the country down on Penny's farm. As George Penny got a flattery mouth, move you to the country to a little log house. Got no windows but the cracks in the wall. He'll work you in the summer and rob you in the fall. It's hard times in the country down on Penny's farm. Check, you pay him for a bushel and you don't get a peck. It's hard times in the country down on Penny's farm. George Penny renters, they'll come into town, hands in the pockets and the heads hanging down. Go into the store and the merchant will say your mortgage is due and I'm looking for my pay. It's hard times in the country down on Penny's farm. Down in the pocket with a trembling hand, can't pay you all but I pay you what I can. Then to the phone the merchant make a call, we'll put you on the chain gang, you don't pay it all. It's hard times in the country down on Penny's farm. Come, you ladies and you gentlemen, listen to my song. Sing it to you right, though you may think it wrong. They make you mad, but it mean no harm. It's just about the renters on Penny's farm, and it's hard times in the country down on Penny's farm.
Read his autobiography, it's heartbreaking that constantly they had to renegotiate these contracts all the time. So it's the same thing over and over and over again. Well, one of the things that they thought about a little bit later on was the use of pesticides. And you probably may have noticed that that's still a problem. Well, Tish Hinojosa, who lives pretty close to the border and is a fine singer-songwriter, has this little song that she sang called Something in the Rain. And it's about a little boy, maybe 12 years old, whose sister is dying from the pesticide poisoning. And he's trying to figure it all out, and in the beginning of the song, he's kind of believing the line that had been given him, that it's something in the rain. And then he starts to think about it. And it kind of sounds like maybe he came into contact with some folks who were organizing, because he starts to change his thinking. It goes like this. Mom and Dad have worked these fields, I don't know how many years. I'm just a boy, but I know how. Go to school, work is slow. We have seen our country's roads, from Bakersfield to Illinois. And when trouble comes our way, oh yeah, I've seen my daddy pray. There's something wrong with little sister, I hear her crying by my side. Mom is shaking as she holds her. We try to hold her through the night. And Mom says, close your eyes, being told. Dream of someplace far from here, like the pictures in your school books. Someday you can take us there. There must be something in the rain. I'm not sure just what that means. I believe to talk so sins of men and prophets free to land. Called Starving to Death on the Government Claim. And it has to do with the Homestead Act, when the government was giving out parcels of land to anybody who'd go out there and who would live out in the Midwest for 5 years, and they could have the land. They had to pay a little bit of money, but mostly stayed on the land. Now, I'm sure you've all seen the pictures of those little prairie sod houses, and in case anybody has a romantic idea that it might be fun to stay in one, this song ought to disabuse you of that. And it's got a good chorus too. My name is Perkins, a bachelor I am. You'll find me out west on an elegant land. You'll find me out west in the country of fame, starving to death on a government claim. Here's the chorus. Hoorah, River County, the land of the free, the home of the grasshopper, bedbug, and flea. I'll sing of its praises and tell of its fame while starving to death on a government claim. Next time around, help me out. Here comes the favorite verse. How happy I am as I crawl into bed. A rattlesnake rattles a tune in my head. A gay little centipede, free from all care, crawls out of my pillow and into my ear. Hoorah, River County, the land of the free, the home of the grasshopper, bedbug, and flea. I'll sing of its praises, tell of its fame, while starving to death on a government claim.
Now, the Indian Territory is basically where Oklahoma is now and the surrounding states. And it was called the Indian Territory because the government was constantly moving Indian tribes there because the land was the least desirable they could find. And they wanted to take all the good land that the Indians were on. So they moved the Creek and the Cree and the Chickasaw and the Cherokee and the Seminole Indians, all peaceful tribes from the southeast who had turned to farming and the white man's way of life. They moved them, all the ones they could get a hold of, on the Trail of Tears out to Oklahoma, and they moved other Native Americans there. There were some blacks who fled slavery and went there. And there were some whites, but the whites who were there were almost all criminals. They were the worst outlaws in the country because there was no law enforcement there. And so they had hideouts throughout the territory. Well, into that rode 17-year-old Bass Reeves. One day, Bass was riding his horse, and out of the brush, hell-bent for leather, came another horse with a little girl on its back. She was maybe 4, 5, 6 years old. She was holding on for dear life, and behind them were running 3 wolves. Well, the girl lost her grip and fell down among the wolves, which immediately jumped on her and began biting her. Bass turned his horse and kicked it as hard as he could and shot for that place. He got there, he jumped off the horse into the middle of the wolves and started kicking them as hard as he could. One of the wolves jumped up and bit into his thigh and tore down his thigh 6 inches from top to bottom. He pulled out his gun, he shot 2 of the wolves, and the third one ran off. And quickly and gently as he could, he picked up that little girl, he got in the saddle. He figured that she had come from a settlement 3 miles away. He looked at his thigh and the blood was coming out very fast and he wasn't sure if he could make it. But he rode as fast as he could and the girl was bleeding as well and he wanted to get her to help. After about a mile he got dizzy. After 2 miles he was faint. And after that he just heard some voices and he felt the horse stop and he went out. He woke up. he didn't know how much, later, a few days maybe, in a sod hut that belonged to the family of the little girl. They were Creek Indians, and they'd been lovingly taking care of Bass ever since they found him and the little girl on top of the horse. One day, Peter came in. Peter was the big brother of the little girl whose name was Betty. And he said, "You saved Betty's life. Hurt yourself." He spoke a little bit of English. And Bass said, "You don't know anything to me. If you hadn't helped me, I wouldn't be alive now." He said, "No, not oh. You saved Betty's life. Betty, sister. You, me, brothers." Put his hands together like this, he said. "All together, one family." Well, Bass spent 22 years with the Creek Indians there in the Indian Territory, getting to know many languages and just about everything they knew about their way of survival and their way of life. In 1863, emancipation was declared, and he left the Indian Territory. He went to Arkansas, he bought a ranch, and he became a very successful rancher. And he had 10 children with a wife named Nellie. He became a real, true family man. When she died, he married another woman named Winnie. If that was all to his life, he would have led a full, exciting, and successful life. But really, his legend didn't begin till he was 51 years old. When he was 51 years old, in 1875, a new judge came to the Indian Territory. The government had decided it was time to clean up the situation there and restore some order. And they sent Judge Isaac Parker. He was known as the hanging judge. And his first job, which was huge, was to hire 200 federal marshals. And Bass was one of them. For 22 years, almost a quarter century, he had been loved and cared for and trusted by the Creek Indians there in the Indian Territory. And being the kind of person he was, it'd be just natural that he would be willing to sacrifice to help them have a safer life. And so he became a marshal. Now, he was extremely successful. He brought in his 32 years, more than 3,000 outlaws, often more than one or two at a time. And the amazing thing about it is that he only killed 14 of the worst, most dangerous outlaws in the country in bringing them in. And because he hated violence, so he would do anything he could to avoid killing somebody. One of the things that he did a lot was he would put on disguises. He had all kinds of disguises. The idea was to get up close to him before they knew who he was. He dressed as an old farmer. He got an old cart pulled by some oxen, old run-down cart, and as he got near the hideout of these guys, he intentionally ran it into a ditch and got the wheel stuck. Well, he figured the outlaws would come out because they didn't want him drawing attention, and sure enough, they did. They helped him get it out, and while they were pulling up a wheel, he pulled out his gun and said, "Let's go nice and peacefully now." Well, they suddenly realized who he was, and they dropped their guns. Nobody wanted to mess with Bass Reeves. And there are 5 pillars of Islam. To believe in no God but Allah, and Allah just means God in Arabic. To believe in God and that Muhammad is his prophet. To pray 5 times a day. To fast during the month of Ramadan. To give a share of your personal wealth to the poor. That's one of the 5 pillars. And to perform a pilgrimage, which a lot of people don't get to do, but that's a goal, to Mecca at least once in a lifetime. And many Muslim women wear a hijab. their head. Okay? Now, most mosques, the equivalent of a church, don't look like that. That's a big and beautiful one in the capital of Turkey, Istanbul. And it just happens that the first story I'm going to tell you comes from that country of Turkey. It's one of many, many stories told about a man who really lived, whose name was Nasrudin. Hoja wasn't really his last name. Hoja means teacher. He was considered a teacher, but he taught in a very odd way. Many of the stories that people have been telling ever since show him sometimes acting very foolish, and other times he acts very wise. And sometimes there's kind of a mix of the two. The story I want to tell you, I learned from another book, but you can find a version of it in the picture book called The Hungry Coat. Okay? It goes like this. One time, the Hoja was invited to a banquet at the home of the Mukhtar, a very important man in his village. Now, the Hoja was considered a wise man, Nasrudin, in his village. And he loved to eat. So being invited to a banquet was perfect. All day long as he was working in the garden, he was thinking, all that delicious food. As I'm eating that food, people will be asking my opinion about all kinds of interesting things. It will be great. All day long he was thinking about that as he was working in the garden, and he was thinking so hard that he didn't pay attention to the time. And he discovered when he had finished and he went home that if he wanted to bathe and he wanted to dress up in his fine clothes, he was going to be late for the banquet. He didn't want to do that. So he went on to the banquet in his work clothes, with dirt on his clothes and dirt on his hands, dirt on his face. And when he walked into the banquet, even though he was sure that the Mukhtar recognized him, the Mukhtar didn't pay him any attention. In fact, nobody did. And they seated him at the end of a long table in the back of the hall. And when the food finally came down to his end of the table, there was nothing left. So the Hoja, with his stomach empty and his feelings hurt, slipped out of the banquet and he went back home. When he got home, he bathed himself completely, and then he put on his finest clothes. He put on an elegant shirt and baggy pants and a great big turban, and on top of it all, he put on his new fur coat. Well, this time, when he got to the banquet, the Mukhtar rose to meet him. And the servant took him and seated him right there beside the Mukhtar in the place of honor. The servants brought him tray after tray of delicious food, and he would take the foods and people were asking him questions, but as he took the food, he didn't eat it. He started stuffing it into the pockets of his coat. And when he ran out of room in the pockets, he started rubbing it into his shirt. He was rubbing it all over his shirt. The kids thought it was funny, you know. Here he was, the wise man in town, and he was rubbing food in his shirt. But the Mukhtar was kind of embarrassed, and he watched him for a while, and finally he said, Hoja, he said, what are you doing? Have you lost your mind? No, said the Hoja, I haven't lost my mind. I'm just trying to teach you a little lesson. You see, when I came here earlier dressed in my work clothes, you barely acknowledged me, and you seated me in a corner, way back in the corner of the hall, where there was no food left for me, and really no one to talk to. When I came back dressed in these elegant clothes, you treated me as the guest of honor. Well, I haven't changed. I'm the same person who came here before. It's only my clothes that have changed. So, it must be my clothes that you're honoring. Out of respect, I'm feeding them first. Eat my clothes, he said. You are the guest of honor. And with that, he stood up and he left the hall.
And it's not important what a person looks like on the outside, it's the person inside.